Hi guys, once again we've got Sajid here and I'm Venkat. Um, you guys must be knowing already, we're part of Loomer World. So today we've got something really exciting lined up. We've got someone um, a few miles away from us and waking up early in the morning for him as well. So hi Josh. Josh runs Zoo Studios, someone that we have been speaking with at length for quite some time now. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Josh, and tell us a little bit about yourself and about Zoo Studios.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Bakken, and I'm the founder of a company called Zoo Studios. And Zoo Studios is a studio that produces a game called Zoo Tiles. Currently, there's one set out called Zoo Tiles Hime, and things are going really good. A little bit about my backstory. I'll try and keep it. It's kind of long, but I'm going to try and keep it really, concise. As a kid, played a ton of board games, just everything I could get my hands on. Board games, chess, you name it. When parents would bring friends over, first thing I would do is try and go grab some board games to get it to the table to, get everybody involved and, try and play. And then this is kind of relevant to Zoo Tiles is back in 1993, there was a game created called Magic the Gathering by a man named Richard Garfield, and that launched revolutionary, evolutionary, seismic, you name it. It was a massive um, it was just a massive shot across the game design bow, if you will, and it really shook things up a lot, including my perception of games and who can make games, and the barrier to entry to get into games. And so that was a big part of who Zoo Studios is and why it exists. And then around 2003, I was having some conversations with someone who was really into the Chinese zodiac, or the creatures of the Chinese zodiac, and asking me, "Hey, what's your animal?" Blah 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 blah. And around that same time, I was also looking at some game prototypes, and there was one that was really really bad. I don't want to go into it too much, but basically, from those from looking at this game prototype and trying to figure out how to make it better, plus the conversations that I was recently having about like the Chinese zodiac, plus the background I had in that kind of collectible game space. It all kind of
Yeah.
just kind of coalesced together into an idea for a game using tiles and do a tile placement game. And that was kind of the seed, if you will, of Zoo Tiles, and to the same extent Zoo Studios. And I ended up putting that game on the shelf for many many years, and focusing on raising my son, and being the good dad and all that stuff. And when my son recently graduated from high school, I was like, well, I'm gonna have a lot of time on my hands, so what about that game that I had back on the shelf? And I had taken that to conventions in the past, and everyone loved it. So I thought, you know what? Let me blow the dust off that. Let me take a look at the rules and the rule set, and I'll take it out to some conventions. And it held up really, really well. And so the idea was, you know what? Let's go for it. I, officially started Studios LLC and started down the pathway of producing this game. And we launched it last November. And so far, the response has been so overwhelmingly positive. I don't even have words for it. Critically, it's doing, really, really well. Sales wise, it's doing well. And we're a micro studio, really, to be honest with you. So the fact that we're getting that kind of recognition and able to kind of play in the same realm as the quote unquote big boys of the space is really cool. So that's kind of who I am. That's kind of where Zoo Studios came from and where Zoo Tiles is. And yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah, the artwork behind you, especially the anime artwork, is amazing.
Oh, thank
So yeah, it is part of Zoo Tiles, right? So yeah,
you.
maybe you can pan the camera a little bit and give us a nice look, just so that everyone.
Yeah, and
Nice.
what's the background story? Like, why did you choose an anime themed style for the game?
Yeah, that's a great question. So originally, when I designed the game back in 2003, it didn't have anime art. It had, I basically went around to conventions, like comic conventions and things like that, and looked for artists whose style I really liked. And most of those artists at the time were, I would consider, classic American artists. So I said, hey, I'm doing this game, and it's based on animals, and I really like your style. Would you be willing to contribute a few pieces? And so I got like 19 different artists to contribute, 2 or 3 pieces here or there. And that was the original core set of the art, which I call Zoo Tiles Classic. And then what happened was, like I mentioned, the game was kind of sat on the shelf with that classic art for many, many years. And when I went and kind of blew the dust off of it and decided I wanted to take it to conventions, a friend of mine who is an acquaintance, he has a very small manga publishing studio called Golden Plume Comics. And he came to me, came with me to the convention, and he saw how everybody was reacting to the game. And he was like, his mindset is kind of from a more of an anime manga standpoint. And he was like, hey, have you ever thought about, doing a version of the game with anime inspired art? And I hadn't. It just hadn't really crossed my mind. So he liked the game so much that he said, hey, you know what? I'll go ahead and commission a set of art, brand new set. If you want to use that would be cool. And I was like blown away because one, the quality was just amazing, and I was just like, wow. But two, anime inspired stuff, at least here in the US, is very what they would call on trend. It's very contemporary, and when I was just seeing it come together, it was like, oh, this is such a good fit. And so that was just kind of one of those things that fell into my lap, having somebody who liked the game and who was connected to like the anime style and that whole community, basically offering up, say, I like what you're doing, let me get some new art in there and see what you think. And I just thought it was amazing. So I'm very blessed on that regard, for sure.
Are there many anime themed or manga themed board games around the world?
So there aren't.
Like, have you come up?
There's at least in the US, I'd say the leading one is a company called Japanime Games, and what they do is basically take licensed anime and bring that over to the US and localize it. So they focus more on like Japanese games and anime and taking those from Japan and bringing them over. But in the United States, there really isn't too many companies that are kind of devoted to that. It's a lot more sword and sorcery kind of stuff in the board game space, here in the US, and just kind of like American style art. That's kind of what's dominating the landscape here.
Yeah, and I mean, we're still waiting for a physical copy to reach us.
Okay.
This is a good time to mention that customs is a whole different hassle for us. But but the game that we played online, I feel that anime blends so very well into the theme of the game and how it runs, right? And it's almost like the artwork and the game flow together. So I guess it was a match made in heaven almost. So without
really
sounding too cheap.
and I think you're right. And the art director, my friend, he directs pretty much like the art. Like basically what'll happen is I give him the title of the tile, and then he'll take that and he'll kind of direct the artist on his vision of what that title says, and he just has a very good sense of what Zoo is from a brand and a game standpoint. So very often he just nails it. He'll show me like a sketch and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's amazing, that's really cool. So we've been working together really well together.
Nice. So what's your secret sauce as a game designer? I mean, what goes into making a game like Zoo Tiles? What's the first thing that you do? Is it inspiration from some other games that you've played? Is it something that you like seeing from outside of the board game world? Like, how does it work?
So I would say the secret sauce for me is that I have kind of like a North Star guiding force or guiding light, if you will, and really what that is is, I mentioned earlier on about when Magic the Gathering was created, and I was there as a consumer of that, from the very beginning. And one thing that happened was that it was something so unique for the time, and something I have never seen replicated again, where there was a community that grew out of something that was so new that it was just amazing. And it was also amazing because it was kind of a competitive space. So imagine giving a bunch of competitive people who didn't know each other, who really had no connection, and giving them a bunch of tools to like build their own version of some fun thing that they could go meet other people and compete in a friendly basis. Those early days, like the creativity that was involved in that, and the community that was built around that was just amazing. And it's not something I've ever seen replicated. So to go back to my North Star thing is, I want to build things that that will probably never replicate that original thing, but it's something that is what I'm seeking, or kind of looking to tap into again, if you will. So for instance, I'm not really interested as a designer to create a board game just for the sake of creating a board game. That's just not what that's not what gets my juices flowing. That's not what I'm really interested in. What I am interested in is giving people, intelligent, competitive, fun people, tools to tap into that on themselves, and then to meet other people who kind of fall into that space as well. And so that's kind of my guiding light, if you will. And so if it's not competitive, if it's not lighthearted, if it's not a way to tap into people's intelligence, then that's not the direction I'm going. And I think that's kind of unique in a way, because so that's why I would call that my quote unquote secret sauce, because that's what I'm doing. And I see a lot of board games come out, and they're great and everything, but they're not quite the same vibe as what I'm trying to tap into.
Yeah, and a great point out of that is, you want your you want players to leave the game having feel some sort of transformation, right? Hey, I was someplace before the game started, and I'm at some place when once the game is done, or kind of go like, hey, wow, I can think of so many other ways that I can play this game. Let me have another go at it. So I think that's something that I think even we try to do a lot, since we create a lot of games for kids. We want them to leave the table going like, wow, that was different. Or even a parent, playing with a child, going like, hey, I know that my child's benefited out of this. Or wait, I thought this was a kid's game, but as an adult, I feel that it's really helped me think of a whole different domain. So yeah, I mean, we completely hear you, I think. So yeah, that's a great point.
So just to go slightly deeper in the design process, like when you say, for example, Zoo Tiles, when you started it, did you have a game mechanic in mind, or what was the process around figuring it out, what works, what doesn't, and then how many iterations did you go through?
Yeah, sure, I can tap into that. Well, like I said, back since Magic got started, I've always had that kind of that competitive nature. Like that's something that I like, and I know that I like. So that's always been in the back of my head, right? And so for Zoo Tiles specifically, what happened was I was whenever I look at a game, I always try to figure out how I might be able to make that game better, just naturally, not even like something that I'm trying to do. And I was and in the Bay Area, at least, there are a lot of opportunities for game designers to kind of get together and to share designs. And I was looking at one design, actually not even from someone in the Bay Area, but it was a design about a bead placement game. And so what you would do is you put your hand inside this bag and you pull out these glass beads, and then you'd place these glass beads in this matrix, I guess, if you will. And I was playing it, and it was just really boring, and it just was not a fun experience. And so it kind of kicked into my brain like, okay, well, how would you make this better? And so I don't want to go into it too much, but basically what it came down to is, eventually I was like, you know what, instead of pulling these beads out, why don't, instead of beads, we use tiles? And then instead of or with the tiles, hey, has anybody ever done a like a competitive game with tile placement, you know? And then I kind of tap back into the collectible game space, like, oh, you know, what are those mechanisms that are used in those fun games that might be used in this game? And the fact that you use tiles on a board versus cards in your hand just opened up just a completely different realm of possibilities. So somebody put it really good, that the game has collectible card game DNA, but it also has board game sensibilities. And I really like that because, you know, there was some DNA taken from collectible card games, but board game players, just the way it plays spatially, are very comfortable with it. And it's not like, okay, I got my hand of cards and you got your hand of cards and we're going to go like this, you know, to each other. It's more like, you know, oh, I have some tiles here and I need to strategically figure out where to place them. And some of the extra things I can do that are some collectible card type mechanics, such as, you know, doing an action and letting my opponent react to that, you know, before everything resolves. So those are kind of some of the thoughts that went into my mind as I was creating it. And then I had a conversation very close to the time I was doing that about the Chinese Zodiac. And it wasn't so much the Chinese Zodiac, but the creatures were just so cool. Like, I remember very early on thinking, okay, well, I can use these tiles instead of these beads. And then I remember hand drawing a snake on one of the tiles and just having it there, and then having another rabbit and thinking, oh, wow, this is really, really cool how the rabbit could be next to the snake. But if the snake tile tried to like do something to the rabbit tile could actually like physically hop away from the snake, you know, like let's like figure out the mechanics of how to let the creatures really breathe and kind of act like, you know, have their same creature characteristics, but on a, you know, a tile situation. So yeah, a lot of those things just kind of came together, I guess, organically, if you will, or the timing was right. But those are some of my thoughts, and those are kind of some of the ways that the game came together.
Yeah, I think, and this is something that while we played the game also, that we mentioned that it's got great table presence as well, right? It's almost like towards the end of the game, the tiles themselves are telling a story, because you got, like you said, the rabbit, the snake, you know, the tiger, the horse. So a lot of things like that coming out in a really cool manner. I mean, we try that, you know, with our games to make sure that kids look at it visually as an experience as well, not just the tactile experience, but like it should appeal to them. They should be able to relate to characters. They should be able to like, you know, begin to aspire to do something differently the next time with a particular character or particular strategy. And I think that, yeah, that's amazing that if it can come out through games, right?
Yeah, it was really great. And the more I work with animals as a theme, as a subject, it's just so much cool. It's just really, really cool. For, you know, accessibility reasons, maybe we'll talk about that later, but accessibility, like everybody can come to the table, and like if I'm explaining to somebody, oh, okay, so this is an action of a rabbit hopping, everybody knows that.
Yeah.
And global thing, right? So I could take it to India, I could take it to, you know, Texas, I could take it to Africa, I could take it to Antarctica, wherever you go. That is not something that's difficult for someone to grasp, that, you know, a rabbit will hop or a horse will kick, you know, or an ox will pull. Those things really lend themselves well. And then as far as the table presence, I just want to touch into that really quickly. Probably the biggest draw and the easiest draw for the game is when I'm at a convention and two people are playing and people are walking by, because, you know, you look at it and you're like, you immediately want to try to figure out, if you've never seen the game before and you're like, what is going on here? You're just trying to like, you see all these random tiles on this table, but you have two people who know exactly what's going on, right? So, but then you're walking by and you're like, wait a minute, this just looks like a podge of, you know, connected tiles, and no real order. There's no board there to kind of support it, but you've got two people really thinking hard about, you know, what's going on in the middle. And so many people just walk by and then just like do a double take and go like, what's this? And I'm like, oh, I'm glad you asked. You know, like, let me show you how this is played. The table presence and the different colors that we use to represent the creatures, and in the Hime version, the anime art, all that comes together to form a really magnetic table presence.
Nice. So how like where are you placed right now with the game globally? Are you getting feedback from other countries, and which all countries have you guys accessed right now?
Yeah, so well, the game just launched in November, so we're still really new, but we've got I'm in talks with people from all over the world, from France, Switzerland, Malaysia, Mexico, Japan. So yeah, we might pick up a distributor there, or a publisher there, so in any of those spots. So they all have games and they're reviewing it right now. And we've picked up a few awards since then, so I make sure that they know that hey, this random game. It's there's a quality that has been recognized so far, so that seems to help as well.
And in your design process, you mentioned about how universal it is for seeing a bunny hop or a horse ride through neigh in a way. How important is that when you're designing the game? Like, do you think about it globally, or is it just, hey, how does the product market fit work for you?
Oh, yeah. Global. So whenever I design, this isn't the only game I've designed so far, but this is the one that's actually gone the furthest in terms of market, launching and acceptance. But whenever I do something, I want to do it for a universal global audience. So I have no interest in doing, like, say, something that focuses on like California or something like that, or even the US for that matter. At the end of the day, I feel that game design really is an art form, and I think that it's one of the greatest art forms that has ever been created out of humanity. And that might be taking things a little far, but that's really how I feel. So if you're going to do something like that, a painter doesn't paint for a certain geographic area, I would imagine. Maybe they do, but they paint for a contribution, I guess you would say, for humanity. And so that's when I design a game, I'm thinking of all the children or all the players all over the world. I'm thinking today, I'm thinking 1,000 years from now. Those are the types of things that get me excited about, game design. And so yeah, it's definitely global in nature. And the good thing, and the really great thing about it so far has been the response has been positive in all of those countries that I mentioned before. So that helps reinforce my thoughts on the universality of the game. And yeah, that's really
philosophical thoughts there.
Yeah, it's tempting to get into this rabbit hole of like philosophy and why you do things as a human being and all that stuff. So I try to keep that a little condensed, but I could talk about the reasons for making games for hours, and we talked again a little bit about like the effect of a game like Magic the Gathering when it came out. Like, I could talk on that for days, because it's just so amazing that when that game came out, what it has spawned. Like, you think about the Pokemon and you think about the Yu-Gi-Oh and all of those collectible type of games, which result in billions and billions, like maybe hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue, since their inception. That is a monumental contribution to entertainment, to thought. It's really quite staggering, and I could talk on the subject for a long time.
And it's like a chain reaction, right? Like, because something that came out so far back still inspires people to create new things, and it's almost like it set off this spark that really goes on and on. So I wouldn't be surprised if like 20 years later there's someone who goes like, hey, Magic the Gathering inspired me. I picked up this game from somewhere, and I remember someone else talking to me about it, and I suddenly went like, hey, this is something that will inspire me to create something new.
Absolutely.
So
I have a question. Might be a bit too late for me to ask this. How did we meet George?
So actually, George got in touch with us. I think this was a couple months before Zoo Tiles officially launched,
Yep, I
and
think so.
I think this is also going to be part of my next question. So I'm going to combine both together. So like something really attracted you to India, right? And you saw this amazing potential that was there, and you were quite curious about what the board gaming scene is in India and how you thought the Zoo Tiles would fit into this entire gaming environment here. I mean, let's get to the crux of it. So from an outside-in perspective, what really attracts you to India, and where do you think your big break is going to happen in India for Zoo Tiles?
Yeah, well, so I'll tell a little story before I jump into it too much. So we talked a little bit before about, my North Star, my guiding points, of why I'm trying to do this. One vision that I had for the game very early on, and it has just kind of been the ideal situation for the game being played. And I don't know why this popped into my head, and I don't know why this vision's there, but I'll just tell you what it is, and I'll explain. And it has to do with India. So when I'm making the game, I'm thinking, what's the ideal setting for this game? And the ideal setting for me was to have, and this is going to sound kind of silly probably, but this was the vision I had. I had a monk or a wise person sitting on a log on one side, and the game in the middle, and then a small child, not small, but like 8 or 9 years old, playing on another log. And so you had like this wise person, you had this child, and they were playing this game in the center. And the wise person, very whimsical and happy, and just kind of like happy in their wisdom, and seeing the kid make wrong moves. But like the question is like, well, how do I go about telling them about maybe that's not the best move? Do I just not say anything and just kind of like let them learn as they lose the game? Do I interrupt them? Like the thought process of the adult in that manner, trying to help the child, create strategic thoughts, and kind of learn strategy. Anyway, that's kind of like the vision that I had for the game. And so obviously that's not, across America, parents aren't sitting down on logs with their kids. But to me, India seems like a very, from the wisdom standpoint and for the caring standpoint of like, family and children, that just seems to mesh, even maybe more so than here in the States. And so that's something that the caring nature, the family nature, the tradition, the wisdom, all of that stuff seems, at least to me, as someone who's never visited India, just kind of from what I've seen and for people who I've interacted with, it seems to be, a very, very close fit, or closer fit than maybe other places, right? Like I wouldn't take my vision and attribute that to maybe like France or something like that, right? That's just not the same vibe, I guess, if you will. I don't know why, I don't know for whatever reason, but India very much kind of meshes with that. And so that's kind of one of the main reasons, because it taps into, I guess it checks off a lot of the boxes for me in terms of my vision for the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the kids that we test our games with, as well as who've played Duma World games, I can safely tell you that they'll probably be the ones looking at the monk going like, hey, he's making quite a few mistakes.
And that's great as well, right? That's awesome. I think as a parent or as a caregiver, that would be amazing. I know when I teach the game, I've taught the game to kids, and they come up and they do some combo that I've never seen before, and I'm just like, wow, that's amazing that you saw that, and great job, congratulations, that's really, really cool. So whoever is teaching whoever, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
So now, I mean, talking about challenges while getting into the Indian market, right? I mean, you said that you've been to quite a few geographies. What do you think, or at least what do you feel would be the best way to enter the Indian market, and what would be possibly your greatest challenges while getting here, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I guess one of the main challenges is that I personally have not been to India, so I will have to rely on a partner who, you know, knows the market very well and who can say that these are the steps we should go about doing it. I can tell you how I've been doing it with other countries, and that is basically first interacting with the influencers, like board game influencers in the space. So like on YouTube or something like that, I'll send them a game. Like I did that for Malaysia, and I did that for Mexico. I found some YouTubers and sent them the game, and they took a look at it and they really liked it. So they did like a little YouTube video in their language, in their, you know, native language. And then from there, they helped me reach out to local board game retailers and kind of took it. Like for instance, the Malaysian experience so far has been great. I sent the game over to there, they opened it, they loved it. They went and then as a separate thing, I was talking to some retailers there, and then those two got together and played it together. And then the retailer is like, yeah, this is a really great thing. How do we work on either importing it or printing it ourselves in Malaysia? And so those are conversations that are going on right now. And I imagine that that'll be very similar to how things will go, you know, as we move into India. I mean, I'm happy to say that I've been talking with a really great company and a really great group of people, and it seems like we have a lot of alignments in terms of how we feel about, you know, the power of games and teaching and the importance of, you know, physically having a game that you can play with your family. So there's a lot of alignment in terms of vision and purpose. So I hope that that I and this company can work to move things forward.
Yeah. And so when you do look at entering into a new geography, are there some things that you believe to be non-negotiables? Like, hey, I don't want this changed in my game, while the others are, okay, fine, I don't mind experimenting with that. You know, like, for example, you spoke about manufacturing, right? You're okay if, let's say, if the game's manufactured in the host country. So what are the things that you go like, listen, this can't change in Zoo Tiles? Or where you go like, hey, I would love customizing. I think it might make the game better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm going to get very far if I'm like really stubborn, you know, throughout the world for Zoo. So I'm very flexible. Really, there's only two things that I can think of that would be my non-negotiables. One is I really want final sign-off on any product that goes to the market anywhere in the world. So, you know, send me a copy, let me look at it, let me play it, let me, you know, spin the tiles and make sure they're of sufficient quality, you know. And then, so that's a non-negotiable thing. I need to be able to sign off on the final product that carries the Zoo brand. And then the other one is basically keeping all of the Zoo creation under one umbrella. So for instance, if I'm in a certain territory and somebody comes up with a great idea for a new tile, it just has to be known that, you know, if we launch that tile into the market, that tile becomes part of, you know, the Zoo catalog or library, and it's owned by Zoo Studios, you know. So those are really the only two things that I think are non-negotiable, and I think they're both very sensible. I you know, I have professionally, I worked in the toy and game space for many years outside of what I'm doing for Zoo Studios. So I worked for some really big companies like Hasbro Interactive. I worked for them for a while. And I'm kind of a student of the toy and game space. So I've read a lot of books on it, about the history of like big companies like Mattel and Hasbro throughout the years. And you'll come up with really crazy, as far as like the rights to games and intellectual property. Like, I forget what the game is off the top of my head, but you know, there's this global rights to this one game, and Mattel owns it for like the EU, and Hasbro owns it for like the US, and some other company owns it for like South America. And it's just like, I remember trying to work on that game, and it was a nightmare because, you know, you had to you had to make sure that what you were doing in the U.S. never made it to another country because they could get in trouble because of rights ownership. And I don't want to go down that path. Everything needs to be very tidy, concise, and globally fluid, I guess, if you will. So so those are really the only two. I need to sign off on the final one, and Zoo needs to stay as one cohesive IP.
Yeah. Was your idea about Zoo Tiles always an offline analog game, or you thought of integrating online bits to it as well?
Oh, well, definitely. I mean, my original thoughts of it was just to focus on the analog play, but it's the digital stuff is just blown up, and it just makes so much sense. I mean, I mentioned me working for Hasbro back in the day. That's what I did actually for Hasbro. I was on the team that was making digital versions of their popular game IP. So like we were working on a digital version of Monopoly. This was back in 2000, but that was like a really big, it was like a common thing, but we were doing browser-based versions of popular board games. So, and that was revolutionary at the time. The fact that somebody in California could sit and look at a screen of a Monopoly game and play somebody in like New York, that was like groundbreaking experiences, So it's a natural thing. The game is up on Tabletopia. I think we played it on Tabletop Simulator. And so I'm actually talking with some companies right now about potentially doing some digital versions, but I can only focus on so much, and my heart is very much into the analog person-to-person kind of play, and families around the table, picking up your customized deck and going to a local area to play other people, and you're looking at what they've done. It's so creative and different from what you're doing. That whole scene, that whole vibe, that's much more of what I'm tapped into. And I'm sure as the game progresses, I'll have more people tapping me on the shoulder and saying, hey, you should do a digital version, or let's partner up on this or that. And that'll be fine. I'm so confident of that I just know it's a matter of time. So I'm kind of just focused on the analog game right now.
Nice. Yeah, and I think something that we also discussed while we were playing the game online was, of course, India's got a huge anime following, but also looking at Indianized themes, right? Because like East Asian countries, South Asian countries, India's got so much of culture, history, heritage. You could find so many characters, so many stories that revolve around animals, like of course, apart from religion, gods, and things like that, but also a lot of mythology that revolves around animals, like even Jungle Book, for example, inspired through forests in India. So a lot of things like that that can really come out well with the artwork. So I think Sajid might be in a much better place to kind of go over those, because we've used so many themes that are not just Indian but globally appealing. So how do you think something like that would fit in? Do you see a non-anime version of Zoo Tiles? Do you see it like localized to different geographies?
Absolutely, on both those points. And that's another reason why I'm super excited to to potentially enter the Indian market. I don't imagine we would use the same artwork. I would imagine we would possibly get Indian artists to create new art for that, and that's something that would be super exciting, and not necessarily in the anime style, although I'm a fan of that. I'm also a fan of diversity of thought and diversity of styles. And so, for instance, if there was like an anime inspired version that was also Indian, you could kind of see that was kind of being shown through. I think that would be amazing, and it's something that I would actually love to take to the US and launch as like a new option for players in the US. So to answer your question, that's something that absolutely excites me. And in terms of branching off into different mythologies and different cultures, that's exciting as well. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about it actually with regard to India and what the changes that might be needed to be made as far as like using the Chinese zodiac. And so, but in my thoughts, I thought, everything should fit really well, because at the end of the day, it's about the animals, and then the Chinese zodiac is just kind of a framework of why they get along, together. But that can be broken up, and that can be, changed with different cultures and different stories very, very easily. But I was thinking, the really only sticking point that I'm seeing is like the dragon. I've not been able to find like a Indian alternative or Indian comparison to the dragon. So I was thinking, oh, maybe elephant. That would be kind of interesting. But the tiles that I have designed for dragons would not necessarily work for elephants. So there's a little work that needs to be done there. But overall, that's really exciting. I want to see, my vision is to have a ton of different styles for zoo tiles and to have them, be very fluid. I would love to see every geography that the game goes into. I would love to see a few things, and I know it's not going to happen. I would love to see printed in the area or close to the area that it's in. I would love to see region-specific art and also tap into different stories that I don't know. So like, I'm really just one person. I'm the designer, and I draw a lot on the culture of America to kind of like some of the tiles names, like when pigs fly. I don't know if that's a saying anywhere else like in the world. I think it's kind of like a Southern US saying, right? But that's one of the tiles for the game, and that's kind of one of the funny things that that at least I bring to some of the tile designs. Gift horse, that's another one. You don't look a gift horse in the mouth. That's just kind of like a US saying, I think. And so there's a ton of tile titles and tile mechanics that fall into a very US regional mentality, mine. But I would love to be able to see like little funny sayings, that is just like an Indian thing, or a Malaysian thing, or a French thing, and I just, that's really exciting to me, and to be able to bring those over, at least to take those from other countries and regions and bring them into the US. I think that would do really, really well as well, because I think people would be like, oh wow, that's really, really cool. The art's different, but I'm going to mix it with this art, and why does this say this? I'm going to Google that real fast and kind of learn a little bit about the history, or why this is funny or something. All that stuff, it just seems very interesting and very intriguing to me.
Josh, let's get a good idea about where you stand right now with online and offline retail, because the world's in the midst of a pandemic. A lot of offline retail outlets have been hit across the world, including India, and online is really taking up as a retail thing. So one of the good things is maybe you can get a lot more data about who's buying your game, how they're viewing it, and what's the kind of push you're getting from it. Where do you think is where does your audience lie? Because I know you mentioned about the old monk and the little kid, and you really want people of all ages playing this, but where do you think is the attraction factor in terms of age and demographics for zoo tiles?
Yeah, so right now what I'm seeing is that there are a lot of gamer adults who are buying this game and playing with their kids. Like that's just what I'm seeing, and that's what I'm hearing from. And most of those people, even though I would say that overall, most of our sales right now are actually being done through brick and mortar stores. We are on Amazon, and we have some e-commerce partners outside of Amazon, and they're selling the games and selling out of the game. So that's really good as well. But that's really kind of what I'm seeing, is that adults, 30s, 40s are finding the game. And these people, they grew up with anime as well. So, they kind of see it, and it's not like a childish thing. So I would say that most of the time, it's not a child going into a store, or it's not a child looking, and what I mean by child is like, a tween, like 9 to 12 or teenagers.
Yeah.
This is very much an adult purchase, and then they crack it open and play with either their kids or friends of their kids or things like that. So that's what we're seeing right now.
So do you have any questions with regards to the Indian board gaming community? Because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people seeing this. Maybe we can answer a few and we can leave some out there for them. Maybe they can take this forward, connect with us, connect with you, and answer some of them maybe. So is there anything that you would like to know about where board gaming is in India right now and where it's headed?
Yeah, so the main thing I'm curious of is where are all your board game conventions? I know that there's one called PeopleCon, right? And I would love to go to that someday. But I was a little shocked in doing some research that population of almost 1.4 billion, and I think MeepleCon is the only one. At least that's what they are. At least that's how they are presenting themselves. I would have thought there would be. I mean, it doesn't have to be like all over the place, but just one. I'm just curious on do you see more conventions happening in the future? Like just kind of curious about that, because to me conventions are just like, I look forward to them. They're like basically my Christmas and every great holiday wrapped into one. So I'm just curious about that. From do you see that growing? Like what are the challenges? Why aren't there more? That kind of thing.
So yeah, I mean, as far as we know, MeepleCon is the only one that's there. We were there. Unfortunately, it didn't happen in 2020 because of COVID. But we were there in 2019, and it was a great time for us. I think board gaming in India, I wouldn't say it's nascent, because we've played with board games like 20, 30 years back, right? I think as something for community-driven board gaming, that's get together with friends, enjoy, kind of play and make it a hobby, something that you do outside of, let's say, what your regular work is, going beyond, let's say, what kids would play, and for tweens, young adults, even slightly older adults playing it is something that has come up as a hobby right now. And I think that's going to be continuing, and it's growing probably more, as far as I know, more than anything else that is there as an activity as such in games and play as such. Definitely there are going to be more conventions, no doubt about that, because there are a lot of communities that work with, let's say, things like board game cafes, these small pop-up shops that sell a little bit of food along with a nice experience, maybe even like drinks, alcoholic drinks, just like a bar slash fun place for millennials to hang out, for young adults to hang out and play games during that process, right? There are a lot of them that have come up over the last 4 or 5 years. And I think that is the first stepping stone to having a bigger convention, not just in major cities like Mumbai, but also in the other ones, places like Bangalore, like Chennai, like New Delhi. Because like you said, we've got such a big population and so many big cities that have got these thriving communities and pockets everywhere. It's only about time that these communities realize that, hey, we need to connect. We need to connect with similar communities around. We need to do something much bigger. So of course, if there are more people listening to this, then I mean, this is your opportunity to start your own convention in your city. So, but yeah, we definitely hear you. I think as a community, as part of the board gaming community, we hear you, and we know that's something that we need to look at as well.
I think just to like tackle the question a bit more deeper, it's a cultural thing, right? Like I was just a few days back, I was talking to a friend in France, and she's like, hey, when you come over here, we'll just visit. There's a gaming cafe next to where I live, and for them it's a regular thing. Like in Europe, board gaming culture is big. In USA also, it's like decently it's decently sized, and of course you have your Comic-Con conventions and cosplay conventions. So the mindset is there, right? Like we are still figuring that part out. Like in India, chess is big, so parents will aspire that their children be chess players. So it's looked, I mean, chess is looked at as a competitive thing. You're like, hey, my child plays chess, or he's a chess champion or whatever.
Right.
When it comes to board gaming, the biggest resource you're fighting for is time in a family's life, right?
Yep.
Usually we are stuck in the traffic. That's a fact for us. And so then once you're home, like, hey, mom, dad, I want to play a board game. Not happening. So usually the children end up playing with neighboring kids, or whoever is around them in the vicinity. So simple things like this, which again, it's a cultural thing, because it's a fact that we commute like almost 1 hour or sometimes 2 hours just one way. So maybe board gaming will be like a weekend activity, or maybe once every 2 weeks.
Yeah, and just to add something to what Sajid is saying, because it's kind of creating a new train of thought in my head. It's also about what games are available, right? Like, for example, when we put our games out, the first question, or before we get them to play, we're like, hey, what games have you played? And usually it's the common answers. Like Sajid said, chess is one of them. Maybe they don't even look at it as a board game, but the others would be like Monopoly, Ludo, Uno as a card game, maybe. There isn't there isn't exposure beyond that, and that's for two reasons. I would say there are not too many Indian board game publishers, because that would be customized for this audience, creating something that is within their price point, within their affordability, but also within their interest domains. And on the other end, if there is a board game that is popular, something like a Catan or a Ticket to Ride, usually there's an inability to own it because it's quite expensive for the median Indian player. So they have to resort to these games that are, let's say, within the $5 or $10 mark at most, as opposed to something like a Catan or Ticket to Ride, which is in the $20 to $25 mark. So that becomes a challenge. So the exposure reduces. With board game cafes now, there's still the opportunity to go there, pay by the hour and still play a different set of board games. So that's a great family activity, even though we see that it's mostly young adults. Families as a whole, at least not that I'm really aware of taking it, to another level. But we do see board game nights. We do see families playing these game nights, especially when we put our games out. Suddenly they go like, hey, wow, I never knew a board game could be like this, or is this made in India, or like, hey, did you guys design this, or have you guys like got it from abroad? So there are a lot of things there that kind of open them up to think from a whole different perspective. And once, I mean, I hate to say this, it's kind of like a man-eating tiger, right? I like to use this analogy as much, even though it's not possibly the best thing. Once they taste the human's blood, that's all you want, right? So once they get a hang of board gaming, that's all they want, oh wow, I want to replicate that experience. I want to go back and play, let's say, Guess the Fence, so I want to go play Zoo Tiles. So it's going to be there, and that's the exposure that we want to give them. We want to give them more homegrown games, more affordable games that they can own, games they could show off to their friends, games they can actually go. And I think over the next 4 or 5 years, you see this entire burst of Indian board games, not just in India, but going out of India globally. The government's making a push for creating toys and games as well. So that's definitely going to add impetus. So
actually, yeah, there's a toy fair happening, I think end of this month, which is promoting Indian game and toy creators. So that's something new for us also.
Yeah.
But I do agree, conventions play a huge role, because you get experience, you get an exposure right then and there, and like for the crowd to make a decision to buy something is like super easy, until and unless like a viral effect about your game is created, then I mean, it's a long shot though.
Yeah.
Hope that didn't scare you.
No, I think it's great, and I agree, and that syncs up very well with what I feel is kind of a natural progression, because you mentioned like a lot of board game cafes popping up. That was the case prior to COVID. That was happening like crazy here in the States, and so I think it's like kind of like a universal thing. I've read some articles on how analog gaming, they're trying to figure out why now, why are these board game cafes popping up now. And I've read some theories that it's as a reaction to people becoming over digitalized, and trying to have that personal connection. And so I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know that at least in the San Francisco Bay Area, there's been, it was booming, and it was a great time to be a part of board games or interested in board games or tabletop. So it's good to hear that the sensibility or the sense that is something that's going to happen in India is similar. Anyway, that's very exciting to hear.
So I guess a lot of things have been asked and answered, so we just wrap this up as quick as possible. One question that we ask everyone: what are your top 5 games, either of all time or what you're currently playing? Which are your top 5?
Well, I'm not going to say Zoo Tiles. I'll just put that off to the side. So I really like a game called Arcadia Quest. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but that's a super fun game for me. I love Arcadia Quest. There's another game called Viticulture. These are board games, by the way. Viticulture, very fun game for me. Let's see, what else do I like to bring to the table? I really like a game called Memoir 44. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. It's kind of like a World War II kind of player versus player type thing. I have to, I mean, for as much as I mentioned Magic the Gathering, I better mention it. Yeah, I don't play it as much as I used to, just because the scene is very different than it was when I originally played, but that's definitely one of my tops. So I think that's 4. And then for 5, my son actually, he is just really into Civilization. Sid Meier's this is a video game for people who don't know. And so he had me download Civilization 6 just recently. And he's in college, but him and his friends are really into that. So they're trying to drag me into that. So we're probably going to have our first multiplayer Civilization 6 game sometime today, actually. And that's a pretty good game. I played some different iterations of it. So yeah, those are kind of the 5 that I am twiddling around in. But really, on a day-to-day basis, it's all Zoo all the time.
Of late, I recently played Decrypto. I don't know if you've heard of it, but Decrypto it's like this old school sending codes through analog kind of hidden way. It was fun. It was different. It was something that I was pleasantly surprised about.
One game which was manufactured in India was it's called Bharata 600 BC.
Yeah.
We enjoyed that one also. Like the production quality is insane.
It's really nice. Yeah. That was cool.
Yeah, you should definitely check it out.
Yeah. I feel that of late, maybe in the last 3 or 4 years, I've been exposed more to board games than I've had in maybe the first 30 years of my life. So
right. Same here.
Yeah. So that's been good, and it's been good fun, especially being part of the board gaming community in India, seeing so many real bamboo shoots sprouting out of everywhere with so much potential, and connecting with people with so many ideas, getting inspirations from everywhere has been great. And plus we get to meet people from all over the world, like people like you, hearing about things like Zoo Tiles. While we were at Spiel this year, in 2020, we interacted with quite a few people. There are quite a few games on our list that we've jotted down. We're like, hey, we need to try these. So yeah, I mean, we're quite excited about where board gaming is headed in India, and I think this is a great time to enter India if you got a board game to launch. So yeah, and we can't wait to see Zoo Tiles here. I mean, that'll be one of the first things. Once again, I hope customs clears it and we get our own copy.
Yeah.
So yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, once again, thanks a lot, and keep on creating amazing games. We're looking forward to more things coming out of Zoo Studios, and and hopefully in the future we can work together, maybe create something that's amazing for India. Maybe it's a homegrown version of Zoo Tiles with Indian artwork and manufacturing in here as well. So yeah, really looking forward to that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, one little shout out before we go. I want everyone to know Starter Set 1 is available, and I'm sure you probably have links to that. But Starter Set 2 is actually getting ready to go to print soon. So Starter Set 1 has 6 of the 12 creatures, and Starter Set 2 will bring out the other 6. So super excited about that, and that should be out for people to start taking a look at very, very shortly.